Hi, this is Dr. Tom Knotts, and I do appreciate the questions and comments. And I was asked if I would do a video on poltergeist, and I've had many encounters with what people call poltergeist over the last 30 odd years. Poltergeist is defined in the English language as a ghost or supernatural entity that manifests itself through causing havoc, causing fear, or moving things about. So, um, in other words, it would be an invisible, and sometimes it makes itself known, an entity that will cause lights to go on and off, radios to turn on and off, pick up objects and throw them. I have two instances where I, I've had many, but I'll just bring two to mind. I used to do a lot of counseling all over Illinois. I was very well known, and for instance, Father Bob at the North Diocese of Chicago would contact me whenever they had what he called a demonic or a ghost disturbance. They believed in poltergeists. And a psychiatrist who became a friend of mine had referred me to a family because he didn't know what to do. And the woman was telling him about manifestations in her home that she couldn't explain. And he finally agreed to come to her home to prove to her that it was all in her head. But while he was there, sure enough, the room filled with the smell of fragrant flowers, and things began to move around. And he said he could feel something horrible had came into the room that made his skin crawl. So that he thought it was a poltergeist, and what it was, it's a demonic spirit. Poltergeists are not ghosts or relatives that have died on. I had another case where a family who were Christian, but they weren't practicing Christians. They said they were Christian, but they were convinced that the grandmother who had died was visiting the children in the form of a ghost. And they had seen it out in the yard. It would manifest in the afternoon when the kids were playing, and the woman said, I saw my mother standing there. The children would be talking to it, and it would appear in the bedroom, and they got very scared, and they called me, and when confronted, its eyes turned red. It turned very hateful, and it, of course, was a demon and not grandmother. It was trying to cause fear in the children so it could come in and create a demonic stronghold. Because God does not give us the spirit of fear, but he does give us one of power, which means authority over entities, a sound mind, the ability to know how to use it, and love, the desire to minister in his name. In the first case, the psychiatrist called me. He didn't want to go into detail. He told me, asked me if it was all right that he refer this family to me. I said, great. He says, I said, how'd you hear about me? He says, well, you've got a reputation for dealing with these kind of things. And I was a psychologist, and I was a pastor, and so I guess word had gotten around, and even though he was two cities over, you see. So I went there, and to make a long story short, the woman had been going to see a tarot card reader and a palm reader, and it all started, the manifestations, right after that. What it is by giving authority to the palm reader and the tarot card reader, if you practice witchcraft, which that's what those are, you open yourself up for a demonic attack. And this entity had begun by putting the smell of flowers in her room. She'd go into her living room, and all of a sudden a bouquet, and it would remind her of her loved one who grew them. But she went into her bedroom, and when she began going to sleep, her husband would come home late. Many times, because of his job, she would already be in bed asleep. Well, the entity began manifesting as sitting on the bed, and she thought it was her husband rubbing her feet and stuff, and she could feel the weight of it sitting on the bed, and she rolls over and looks up, and there's nothing there. And it scared her. But what it was the demon was taking on the form of a poltergeist or a wraith. It would throw things around, begin breaking things, tried to start harming her, and when it began harming her is when she sought help. I led her in prayers to confess her sin of going to an occultist, palm reader, tarot card user. and asked God to forgive her and cleanse her home. The entity was never felt again or heard from again. The second case that I told you about, where grandmother was appearing to the children, when I came out to confront it, it manifested and made itself known. But by confessing, because you see, the family claimed to be Christian, it was a single mother with two children. She was also a practitioner of witchcraft, and her friends were Satanists and witches. And they would babysit the children. And what she did not know was, though she was a white witch, the person that was her babysitter was a satanic priestess whose husband was a satanic priest, and they were doing rituals with the children. And this demon, which we would call a familius generalis, or a familiar spirit, took the form of grandmother and was trying to get into the children in order to cause a demonic stronghold. And when they do get into the child, they begin living in them and changing the way they feel and think, and working through them. So I led her in prayers to renounce the rituals that were done with her children, and the spirit never showed itself again. I have one last case where I was called by a Christian family who had what they called a poltergeist that was very aggressive. It was slamming doors, not letting the husband get in, and slamming the wife off the wall and into the bed and hurting her. And he tried to kick the door in. He shot it with a .44 Magnum. It would not open until the thing was done hurting his wife. This was a demonic spirit. It wasn't a poltergeist, once again, or a ghost. And it was because literally they had bought a cursed item, a lamp, and brought it into their home. And it was a very old lamp from the 1920s, beautiful lamp. And for some reason, this demonic entity was attached to the lamp. And when they brought it into their home, they brought the cursed object in, and it began assaulting her and physically assaulting her. And so I led them in prayer, and that's how we discovered that it was a cursed object, and then led them in prayer to ask God to cleanse it. And the spirit never manifested again. They still threw the lamp in the trash. He actually broke it in pieces, threw it out, which he didn't have to do, because once God's cleansed it, it's clean. So poltergeists are nothing more than demonic spirits that try to manifest themselves in malevolent ways, and people often think that they are ghosts or something supernatural. So this is Dr. Knotts. I thank you for the question and the request, and I hope this has answered your question and fulfilled your request. Lord bless you all. In Christ's name.